It's getting down to crunch time with only 5 days remaining before training camp, but the head coach and the captain aren't quite worried about Jeremy Swayman's contract status just yet.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoke to Be. Today is Friday, September 13th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. Free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Before we get started, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins, and you can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. As I speak, Bruins hockey is being played. The rookies gathering in Buffalo to take part in the Prospects Challenge. They're taking on the Pittsburgh Penguins. On Monday, we'll have some thoughts on the weekend's action. Yesterday, players, coaches, some former captains gathered for a golf event. And the talk of the town, of course, was, or the talk of the turf, green, rough, everywhere, was Jeremy Swayman's ongoing contract stalemate with management. A few weeks ago, head coach Jim Montgomery said he had no doubt Swayman would be a Bruin at the start of training camp. But we're now only 5 days away. Swayman still isn't signed. So Montgomery was asked about it again at Thursday's Bruins Foundation golf tournament. And his answer was a bit more guarded than it was even just a few weeks ago. Montgomery said, "I'm not going to get into the contract situation. Not his area of expertise. It's Don's," of course, referring to general manager Don Sweeney. He was asked if Swayman potentially missing the start of camp would change the way he approaches camp. And he said probably not, because they lean towards the veterans playing most of the last 3 games. So the Bruins' first preseason game is September 22nd. That's 9 days away. There's 6 more after that, stretching through to October 5th, and they open the regular season on October 8th. So this seems to imply that Montgomery at least expects Swayman to sign at some point during training camp, but if he's not there to begin, it's not the end of the world. They'll give Brandon Bussey a look early on, give your Jonas Korpisalo every opportunity to get up to speed. If Swayman doesn't sign, say, until after the preseason begins, as long as he's in there for the last few to get some game action in before the regular season opener on October 8th in Florida against the Panthers, that is the main goal. Bruins captain Brad Marchand also addressed Swayman's situation on Thursday. He said, obviously, it's a big topic of conversation with fans and the media. This is part of the business. We're all really looking forward to when it does get done and the process is over and he's back with the group. But that's obviously out of the players' hands, and they don't get involved in any of that. So it'll be great when everything kind of gets squared away. Swayman, of course, was at the captain's practice. He's been skating informally at Warrior, not at the golf event, but he can and will be a full participant as soon as Wednesday. There's still a few days here to get things going. Elliot Friedman addressed the situation on the 32 Thoughts podcast here on Friday, saying he wonders if the Bruins perhaps regret not taking Swayman to arbitration just to lock him down for at least this season and the next. If there's some worry that he may not be able to handle the load as a number one, maybe they want him to show that he can do that before committing huge bucks, then maybe that arbitration route would have been the smart thing to do just to get him locked in. But we all know that last summer's arbitration process really took a toll on Swayman, emotionally, mentally, professionally. I think it did cause some resentment in this relationship, and it's one of the reasons why he's motivated to seek his payday now, because he has put in the work. He has debunked all the potential questions about whether he can handle the load in every season, in every postseason, or this past postseason at the very least. He showed his worth as a legit elite number one goalie at the NHL level. So he has every right to not elect arbitration, to seek the best possible contract for himself, and also to help set the goalie market for others who will be due contracts after him. And taking a team-friendly deal would put those guys behind the 8 ball as well in terms of comparables. So Swayman, still looking for the big bucks. If the Bruins do elect to start Bussy in the NHL and send Korpisalo through waivers for the purpose of assigning him to Providence, then that would free up a couple $1 million that they could use for Swayman and to add some scoring as well. Perhaps add Tyler Johnson to the mix or others. So that's a consideration as well. But if Swayman's not signed, they're obviously going to have to rely on Korpisalo. And Kyle Bukauskas raised a good point that we're all asking on 32 Thoughts about: if you were going to trade Linus Ullmark, why did you not have Swayman signed right away? And Friedman believes they may have rushed that trade, to get into the first round of the 2024 draft, but also before Ullmark had an opportunity to amend his no trade list. Ottawa was not on there, so the Bruins were free to trade him there without his consent or signing off on that. Post July 1st, he could have amended his no trade list, and if there were rumblings that he was going to be traded to Ottawa, if he didn't want to go there, then he could have voided that deal. And the Bruins would not have gotten into the first round, and they would still have Ullmark under contract or have to trade him elsewhere. As of right now, still having Ullmark doesn't look like the worst thing. That's the very latest on Jeremy Swayman. We're going to talk about training camp coming up next week and another potential PTO option. Very slight option, but it would be kind of cool. I've been advocating for the return of this former Bruin here for a while, and I'll discuss that here as the podcast continues. Passion, drive, and patience, what makes your car the MVP, is what fuels eBay Motors as well. The formula for winning championships is pretty set, and eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. They have over 122 million parts for your ride, and you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. All the parts you need at the prices you want. It's easy to turn your car into an MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply, and the eBay Guaranteed Fit is available only to U.S. customers. Thank you so much once again for making Locked On Boston Bruins part of your daily routine. For your next listen, check out Locked On NHL. All the latest news, analysis, and opinions from our local host and national perspectives. All the latest on the NHL every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, while I was listening to 32 Thoughts this morning, another name popped up, and that was Phil Kessel. Now, he hasn't played in a while. The last time he was on NHL ice, he was actually holding the Stanley Cup as a member of the 2023 Vegas Golden Knights. He played 4 playoff games that year after appearing in all 82 regular season games. He holds the league's current Ironman streak for most consecutive games played, but he's around 14 months removed from his last pro hockey action. Retirement may be an option, but Sportsnet's Elliot Friedman reported on the 32 Thoughts podcast that Kessel is still in the process of trying to latch on with a team somewhere this season. He wants to play, Friedman said. He's heard it from a couple people. He's legit about it. He loves hockey, and he has put it out there that he wants to play. Kessel has 992 career points across 1,286 games with Toronto, Pittsburgh, Arizona, Boston, in addition to his time with Vegas. He's a 3-time Stanley Cup champion. And while he sat out last season, there was one team that came pretty close to offering him a contract, and that was the Vancouver Canucks, who worked him out for a lengthy period late last season, but opted against signing him ultimately. So that's something to keep an eye on. I would love to see Phil Kessel back in black and gold. The club and Kessel, that would be the Canucks, did not agree on a contract. They needed to come to terms with the forward before the trade deadline to keep his eligibility open for last year's playoffs. They were looking to add a top 6 winger through trade. They missed out on Jake Guentzel, Tyler Toffoli, Jason Zucker, and he had been working out in Abbotsford, their AHL club, for a few weeks prior to the deadline. Again, 3-time Stanley Cup champion. He's a great character, person in the room. Teddy Bluger of the Canucks and also formerly of the Penguins and Golden Knights said he loves Phil, one of his favorite teammates ever, one of the funniest guys. And he was a big part of the camaraderie, bringing guys together last year in Vegas. Now, if the Bruins were going to sign Milan Lucic last year, in fact, they did sign Milan Lucic last year, I would make an argument that Kessel could be a PTO guy as well. Maybe even just for some levity during training camp. It would be cool to see him back in black and gold. It would be cool to see him maybe even at least in a preseason game. He's the 3rd highest scorer from the 2006 draft, ahead of even Brad Marchand, albeit in more games. 1,286 games, 992 points. Marchand's at 1,029 games, 929 points. Lucic, for the record, 586 points in 1,177 games. He's in the top 10 as well. All 3 were picked at the 2006 draft, which was a pretty formational draft for the Boston Bruins, to be sure. So, Phil Kessel, could he be an option in play for the Bruins on a PTO? Who's to say? I wouldn't say no if it were to happen. Is he that much worse than Tyler Johnson at this point? Certainly not worse than our boy Milan Lucic last season. There's already some reports out there of teams possibly looking into him. The Edmonton Oilers, for one. Apparently, Biz Nasty had a tweet this week about how come Phil Kessel can't get a job. So that's what prompted Elliot Friedman to look into it. And Kessel's been calling teams, really wants to play. And again, he is legit about wanting to play. There was that 3-on-3 league also that was supposed to start up but didn't. And Kessel was one of the guys that they were talking about perhaps joining. He wants to play. He loves the game. Nice guy. Tries hard. Loves the game. But it's very legitimate that he's put it out there that he wants to play. Could Don Sweeney come call in and bring him in to training camp on a PTO? I think it would be super fun. I would love to see it. And we'll indeed see if that comes to fruition. Tyler Johnson will be there. Perhaps James Van Riemsdyk. There was the report on Blake Wheeler. Kyler Yamamoto signed with Utah. Philip Zadina, who I was also big on, is in Switzerland. There are options, but the Bruins have to see how much space they have to potentially sign anybody, and that's all dependent, of course, on the Jeremy Swayman contract resolution, which we hope comes soon. We know that training camp begins Wednesday, September 18th. The NHL released some other key dates, and we'll touch on that here as the podcast continues. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find a quality candidate fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon. Support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on Locked On Boston Bruins. That's Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. The NHL announced some key dates for the hockey calendar for the upcoming season, and I'm so excited for hockey to get going. Puck will drop on the 2024-25 season on October 4th and 5th with the pair of games between the Buffalo Sabres and the New Jersey Devils over in Prague. On October 8th is when the season will begin here in North America on a night where our Bruins will be in Florida to watch the Panthers banner raising ceremony as they celebrate their Stanley Cup win, which of course included a series win over the Boston Bruins. Now, prior to that, the NHL Board of Governors will meet in New York. We'll get some interesting tidbits from that, of course. On October 22nd, there will be a Frozen Frenzy where all 32 teams will be in action. And then after that, there will be a global series in Finland with games played between the Stars and the Panthers, both of which feature some prominent Finnish players. There'll be another Board of Governors meeting on December 9th and 10th. There'll be the holiday trade freeze from the December 20th to 27th, I believe. From February 10th to 21st, there will be a pause in the season for the Four Nations face-off. A big one I always love, of course, the trade deadline, 3 p.m. Eastern on March 7th. The final day of the regular season will be April 17th. The playoffs will begin on the 19th, and then June 23rd will be the last possible day for the Stanley Cup playoffs. If it were up to me, I would move this all up at least 2 or 3 weeks. I would have training camps begin the day after Labor Day. I would have the regular season begin late or mid-September, and the last possible day for the playoffs would be sometime in May, maybe early June. But June hockey, no thanks. I would have this all bumped up a little bit. Of course, our Boston Bruins, there's some key dates for them. Training camp begins on Wednesday, the 18th. Their first preseason game is Sunday, September 22nd. Then they'll play games on the 24th, the 26th, the 28th, the 1st, and the 3rd in preparation for the new season, as well as on the 26th and 28th. So, a lot of dates coming up for the Bruins, a lot of things to get excited about. As far as programming goes, there will be a full slate of shows coming up, season previews, an Atlantic Division roundtable that I'm excited about, and we're going to bring you all the latest on the black and gold here because that is what we are all about here on Locked On Boston Bruins. Be sure to be plugged into the YouTube channel for all breaking news. Be sure to jump on your favorite podcast app and also subscribe to Locked On NHL on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube as well. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Please do take care of yourselves, friends. Take care of each other. Have a fantastic weekend. And we'll talk to you here on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.